Hello, and welcome back to the Solver School YouTube channel. I'm Mike Lukic, the founder and creator of Solver School, and this week I'm back with another video for you guys. And as you can see by the title, today is not a Solver Shorts video. I decided to take a little bit of a break from that series. I'll be picking them up again soon, but this is actually a video that I've wanted to make for a while now. If you've seen some of the videos on my channel already, the chances are that one of them has actually been my How to Use GTO Plus series that I've had on my channel since 2020. And when I first jumped into solvers in the first place in 2017-2018 timeframe, I first got GTO Plus, and I was looking for a lot of content out there to really learn the software, and I found a lot of content made with POSolver and not necessarily so much for GTO Plus. So that was really the main inspiration for me to create that series back in 2020, and it's by far gotten the most views and it's the most watched content on my channel. Now, that GTO Plus series was released in 2020, and most of the core functionality of the software is still the same. But there has been a number of updates from GTO Plus since then that has really enhanced the software and made things a lot better, in my opinion. I believe when I created those videos back in 2020, they were on version 1.30, and recently, actually just yesterday, they released version 1.49. So there's been 19 different releases since I released those videos in 2020. So there's a lot of updated functionality in the software to review. And that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to take you through the software, and I'm going to really highlight the main new pieces of functionality and the new features that I didn't touch on in those previous 4 videos or that have come out in the last 2 years. So without any further ado, let's just jump right in and take a look at what those features are. So here, I just highlighted a few of the main ones that I'm going to touch on during this video, but some notable GTO Plus updates since 2020. First off, one of the first updates that came out in 2020 after I released that video is a faster engine, and we'll talk about that. There's a play against the solution function, which actually was out right when I released the videos, but I didn't actually touch on it in any of those 4 videos, so I'll go through the play against the solution functionality. I will cover some updates on tree building syntax, and actually if you watched my Solver Shorts episode 2, I did cover a little bit of the GTO Plus bet sizing syntax, but I'll touch on that a little bit here. There's a really cool feature, one of my favorites perhaps, is the range versus range comparisons, which GTO Plus has added as a nice different way to browse through the UI. They've added some MTT functionality, so they've added ability to add ICM into your calculations. They've added some integrations with HRC so that you can easily import any trees or settings that you've built in HRC. They've added some database mode functionality, so you have a little bit more options to work with within your databases. There's a variety of UI updates, whether there be different buttons, summary tables, mouse overs. The software already was easy to use, and they've made it a little bit easier. And then there's just additional language support, which I'll touch on that as well too. So overall, there's been a lot of great updates within GTO Plus since 2020, but without any further ado, actually, let's just jump over into GTO Plus itself, and I will take you through each of these main updates. So before we actually jump into the software itself, I thought I'd show you where you can actually download the new GTO Plus updates, and you can see right here that they are on beta version 1.49 and the stable version is 1.44. I tend to use the beta version. They are usually quick at fixing bugs, and I actually never really notice any bugs when I'm using them. So the beta version I think is just as good as the stable version, and you also get the latest different functions. I created that original video back here using version 1.30, and you can see all of the new things that GTO Plus has added along the way. You can read through all of these release notes. I'm not going to go through these releases one by one. A lot of these things that they've added are individual UI changes, bug fixes. They actually, a lot of times, they'll have different pictures to show you those things. So for instance, like this one right here, you can now load specific trees from a database. If I click pick, it'll show the specific things that you can add. So in this case here, under the file menu, if you want to only load a selection of those trees, you can choose the flops that you want to load here into your database mode. So, and all of these have a lot of different pictures that will highlight exactly what those changes are. But right now, I'm going to cover those 8 new topics that I just went through at the top of the video, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll dive over into GTO Plus and show you the specifics of those different pieces of functionality within the tool to demo them for you. The first one that I wanted to add here was made in July of 2020, version 132, is this new engine, and I noticed a difference on this immediately. I don't have any specific benchmarks. GTO Plus claims that it's almost 2 times faster on their own machines, but this is something, again, that I've noticed immediately. I am constantly running different scripts. Sometimes I'm solving just one tree, but a lot of times I'm solving many trees at the same time. When I kick off a script overnight, I want there to be a lot of progress in the morning, and I definitely noticed that I was able to churn through databases much more quickly after this update was made. So GTO Plus, I think it's just as fast, if not faster, than PO Solver. It's a very, very fast solver. And this is something that made it much faster too. So you have the ability to run complex solves, and as long as your machine is decent, you're going to be able to churn through those solves reasonably quickly. Now, number 2 on this list is the play against the solution function. And for that, I've actually loaded up a database. And for a lot of these, I'm just going to show you I've loaded up a database here. I'm actually working on another video right now where I've solved all 1,755 unique boards for a specific situation. This is something that I'm working on for my Solver School content, but I can demonstrate to you using this database some of the different features within GTO Plus. And this play against the solution functionality is you click on these cards icon here, and what that's ultimately going to do here is it's going to take me to this play against the solution screen. Now I can click on the instructions, and what that's going to bring up is the detailed instructions for how to use the play against the solution functionality. So definitely something that's useful to dig into a little bit more. When you are playing against the solution, you have a few different options here. So you can play versus a database, or you can play on a current tree. Now this is great if you have a database in mind and you want to work through, especially in my case here, this 1,755 hand database. You can really play the entire game tree in here and get no shortage. You get no shortage of situations for you to drill through. You can choose if you are in position or out of position, or you can switch that up along the way. If you want to connect this to Flopzilla Pro, you can do that as well too. And then we have these special options here where you can either drill the current decision or lock a hand for hero. I don't ever really use any of these features. The drill the current decision is only applicable if you are using this play versus the current tree. And when you do have your features all set up, so I'm just going to choose this play versus the database. I'll keep myself as in position. I will not export this, and I'm going to sit down. And when I sit down, it's going to take me to this screen where I can actually now update some of this information here. So I can choose to go normal speed, faster speed, fastest speed. I can show the hand histories or not show them over here on the right. I can show equities if I want to give myself some additional hints here, so showing this equity against my opponent's range. And then I can show this hints here. So I have some training settings where I can show some rounding. I can maybe show the correct answer after making a decision or not. And then this hints functionality here, I can actually either do the show the solution, no hints at all, or this training mode where if I choose the wrong action, the solution will actually be shown. So in this situation here, I'm in position. Our villain here has already checked this Jack 3 board. I do have an RNG here if I want to use that in this case, but I'm not going to necessarily worry about that right now. I can just choose whether I want to put this into a small bet, a 75% bet, or a little bit of an over bet. I think this is probably going to be a small bet spot, so I click small bet, and my opponent then folds. What I can do here is it can show me over here on the right hand side what whether this play was optimal or not. So maybe let's try to make a mistake here, and we can show you what happens if you make a mistake. So next hand, we're back in the same exact spot again. We're in position, Jack 6-3 rainbow board. I think this is probably again going to be closer to a range bet, but I'm just going to put an over bet in here to show you what this is going to happen. And when I put the over bet in here, my opponent folds. It's going to then quickly show me here at the end that, well, that here is looking like it might have been an optimal play anyways as well too. Let's see. Well, in those cases there, so in that last hand, they probably all were fine. Let's just get to a spot where they're not going to be fine. Well, regardless, yeah, okay, so we actually made it to a turn here in this spot. So I just chose another overbet and we made it to the turn. The turn actually gave us a little bit more equity here, but in this case, we're ultimately going to be want to check. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bet this again just to show you what will happen. So if we bet this again and get to the river, and I'll just kind of call because we made our straight here. It's going to come over here on the right hand side, and we can see that this play here was suboptimal, and I can drill into that play if I want as well too, and it'll show me that the suboptimal play that I made here was this turn here where the correct response was to check, and I actually lost about 0.31 or 31 cents here in EV, or 0.31 big blinds in EV by choosing this bet here on the turn. So again, a really good way to test yourself here. The one thing I actually will say that as a negative in my opinion here about the this playing versus the tree, or playing versus a database in this in GTO Plus, is when I actually, and this is actually why I don't necessarily use the play against the solution functionality in GTO Plus. I use another tool for this. Is that I like to drill a spot and stop there and then move on to drilling that spot again on a different hand, so rather than play out the rest of the hand. So for instance, if I'm working through flop continuation bets, I'd rather essentially just drill in position flop continuation bets and just have multiple spots in the same exact node, drilling that over and over again, and then moving on to a different node later on. The game tree is just so vast that I don't want to necessarily have to go and play the rest of that hand. I'd like to kind of drill different spots. But otherwise, this is a really good way to build out a database and then test yourself against this database. And in my opinion now with solvers today, this is a core piece of functionality that you have to have within solvers. It's table stakes. So the fact that GTO Plus added this, it's a pretty good piece of functionality. The next option here is going to be the advanced tree builder. And I did touch on this in my Solver Shorts 2 video, but GTO Plus has added in the last couple of years different options and different functionality to really enhance what you're doing when you're building out game trees. First and foremost, they have added geometric bet sizing. So you can see here that I use this G2 functionality. And what that's doing here is basically choosing to basically split bets for the turn and river into two equal sizes in proportion to the overall pot size. They've also added this A functionality here to add all-in bets. They've added this code builder up here on the top of the screen where you can add in different pieces of code as well too. So when you go over to the GTO Plus page and you can click that question mark up there, it'll show you the different syntax for the code field. So these are somewhat unique situations oftentimes. So adding a B here is going to let you set a minimum bet size. Adding an M here is not going to allow raises below a min raise, and so on and so forth. The tree builder here also has some detailed information in this advanced tree builder, which will give you really all of the syntax that you need to build out really detailed game trees. So when you are working within GTO Plus, you can do a lot of different things to really customize your game tree to make them as accurate as possible. The next one in here is perhaps my favorite new piece of functionality that GTO Plus has offered, and that's this range versus range comparison. So if I click on this compare range OOP versus imposition, this wasn't there until earlier this year, but if I click on this, it's going to take me to what kind of looks like the Range Explorer screen almost within PO Solver. And again, this is my absolute favorite piece of functionality in GTO Plus. So the way to look at this here is it's going to show you the adposition versus the imposition. So the adposition is going to be colored as blue, the imposition is going to be colored as green. So you have a few different things. One, you can see the ranges for the two different players. So this is going to show me the adposition range, the green is going to show me the imposition range. I can choose to normalize or not normalize them. It's going to show me too this kind of function, this graph here to show me the hands and where the different hands sit in those ranges, as well as this equity graph, which I love equity graphs. It's I first saw these in Will Tipton's book, Advanced Heads Up, No Limit Hold'em. And these are really great ways to visualize how different ranges interact. And you can very easily and quickly see here the imposition range, which is the green, just has so much of an equity on this particular game tree than the adposition range. And it just that gap in the area between these two, that's essentially how to quantify the value that the imposition player has over the adposition player. It has this cool different hand class functionality here, so I can look at the different hand classes and how the sets are in one player's range versus not the other player's range, two pairs, top pairs, and so on and so forth. It does this by percentage, or I can click on this and do this by combos. So I can quickly see here that, yeah, while there's some nuts here in the adposition player's range, there's a lot of two pair in the adposition player's range, and they have some decent top pair coverage here in the adposition player's range as well. There's a ton of hands here that are either weak pairs or no-made hands at the bottom of the range that is really driving the fact that the adposition player just has so little equity in this hand. And that's kind of that range density or lack thereof for the adposition player is really what causes that equity differential here. So, really cool way to look at this. You can also look at this from an absolute or relative perspective. So relative just kind of fills up the screen from to kind of show you who has more of what from the percentage and combos perspective. The absolutes is just kind of more tagged to the greatest number. And then finally, we have here on the right-hand side, you actually have the table, so you can look and sort through the individual hands in range as well too. So I can go through and see, well, what's the top equity hand in range for both the adposition player, and the adposition player here is pocket sevens for the low set, whereas the imposition player, the top hand in range here is this, it's probably aces, but we go up to the top and yep, it's aces. So yeah, top set aces, highest equity in range, and so on and so forth. You can work your way all the way down to see for every single individual hand, the equity, the number of combos. This is done down to the individual combo level, so it's always going to be either 1 or less than 1 if these are in there at a partial level, and then the expectation value for each of those. The next option is this MTT functionality here. So GTO Plus has added much more ICM components. So they've added ICM components to be able to really take those calculations into account when you are solving your game trees. If you're familiar with ICM, the independent chip model, it's really a tournament-specific concept that demonstrates the fact that the value of each individual chip is not the same, right? So as you are getting closer and closer to either the bubble or pay jumps or whatever the case may be, your decisions are going to change, and you're not going to necessarily focus on pure chip EV considerations, because sometimes it may take a much higher quality threshold hand for you to make a certain decision. Otherwise, that even if something is chip EV positive, it may not necessarily be your most optimal play because of whatever prize structure there is. So there is different ways in which you can enter those prizes in here to run some ICM calculations. You can also, if you go to the import, you're importing this JSON files. So these JSON files are files that are exported from HRC or Hold'em Resources Calculator. And I haven't done a lot of work with this just yet, but what you can do is you can actually build some models within HRC and then export them, and then you can actually import them here into GTO Plus to incorporate them into your calculations as well too. So they're adding much more MTT capabilities in this as well. Next is some additional functions for the database mode. And as you can see here, I spend a lot of time working within the database mode. I have a database right here of 1,755 flops that are solved. And this screen looks a little bit different in this view than it does in the video 4. If you've watched my part 4 video, they've added some different features in here. So one, you can hover over all of these question marks and it will tell you a little bit more about that particular option. But what they've added here is you can actually rebuild the database. So if you've made a change to the tree, or whatever the case may be, clicking that button is going to ultimately help you rebuild the overall database. You can merge the contents of multiple files together into a single database, which is a cool feature here. You can load different subsets in here as well too. And then you can kind of export this database into separate save files as well too. So just different ways in which of working with your database is something that's been pretty cool that they've been able to add into this feature. They've also added some weightings in here, so you can see that some of these are 4s and 12s, and I believe there's some 24s that are in here as well too. This is really, and here's the 24s. This is showing the weightings of those particular boards. So there's a concept called isomorphism, which is really saying that there are different ways to create that same exact board. So while there are over 22,000 unique flops, only 1,755 of them are strategically different. So this 222 board, while it's a 3 deuces, there's 4 different ways you can make this 222 board. So whether you change the different suits, and those 4 different 222 boards are all going to strategically play the same. Same thing with rainbow boards. So rainbow 4-3 deuce board here, there's 24 different ways we can actually make a rainbow 4-3 deuce. They're all going to play the same exact way. So there's some weighting functionality that we can include in this database as well to really make this a more holistic solution, especially when you're averaging those out. It's going to take into account these weightings into the overall average. The last 2 things are smaller things to call out. So there's been a lot of just UI updates that have been made to the overall game tree. So for instance, one of the things that I really like is actually if you click on this export button for all of these game trees now, what GTO Plus has added is this summary down here at the bottom. So, and it's actually probably better to do that if I go into the game tree itself and pick an option here. I can export table contents, and this is really great to pull data into Excel or CSV files. But at the bottom here, they've added in this summary, which a lot of times I had to calculate that before, and now all of this is in here. The one thing I'll note is that if you've done some advanced work and you just take this data and put it into a Excel or a CSV, and then you have some automated scripts that pull that into a database, you'll have to update those scripts to be able to dig into that functionality a little bit more. Other than that, just some smaller features that they've added throughout. So They've added in here on the right hand side of the screen on the hand classes. So now you have the option to really look at this from an absolute versus relative perspective. So again, you can see this, the relative perspective is, I think these are nice when you can look and see what portion of each of the different components are being slotted in different bet sizes versus the absolute, which is showing you the just sheer number of combos. They've changed this UI function up top. So we have this, I tend to like this, the Tree Navigator Compact, which is going across. So now the flop decision is here, and if I want to go to choose a turn, it's going to be right next to the flop, and I can go so on and so forth and work my way all the way over. Whereas in this, if I click on here and show you the classic, what you would end up seeing is you, especially if you had multiple, like a lot of different bets, and you can see it would push this further and further down, so you would be working with far less of real estate here. I much prefer this compact and work my way across, and in this way I have a ton of screen space here to view the outputs of the solution. And then there's this nice little cool little functionality here to add this current tree to the overall database. And really at the end of the day, again, like I think GTO Plus, they've added a lot of cool features. This last one is really not a feature for myself, but definitely for folks who are using GTO Plus in a different language. But GTO Plus has added support for downloading and using the software in Russian, in Chinese, and in Spanish. So if you are in any of those countries, or if that's your primary language, then you can view GTO Plus in using any of those languages, and all of the English words, obviously, that I'm looking at here are going to be displayed to you in those particular languages as well. And that does it for really a lot of the updates. As I mentioned here, you can go back to this download page and take a look at all of the different features and functionality that GTO Plus has added over the last 2 years. So I think the big takeaway that I have is that the software is still in active development. There's been updates here. There's already been 3 updates here this month alone in October. There was an update in September. There was an update in August. There was updates in July. So you see a lot of new updates, and that just tells me that the developers and the folks who are working on the software are spending a lot of time working through backlogs, working through to add different pieces of functionality and really just make it a really good tool for use. So again, big thumbs up, and it's still the solver that I use the most. I do use PO Solver on a regular basis. I use Simple a little bit, and I'm diving into HRC a little bit more as we speak now as well, but GTO Plus ends up being the one that I use the most frequently. And that does it for today's video. Thanks again for watching. The thing I'll say to wrap everything up is that GTO Plus, it still remains the solver that I tend to recommend to the most people. It's first and foremost the most affordable software that's out there. At $75, it's really a no-brainer as compared to the other software out there like PO Solver or Simple. It's going to be less expensive and more affordable for you, and it can do really the overwhelming majority of things, if not all of the things that you're going to be doing on a regular basis within PO Solver or the Simple tools. It's also, in my opinion, the visually most friendly software. It's really easy to work with. It's really easy on the eyes. It's most intuitive from a UI perspective, and it's getting better from an aggregated reporting standpoint. And some of the more power user capabilities like aggregated reporting and other things like that would be reasons why you might ultimately choose PO Solver or Simple over a GTO Plus, but GTO Plus is getting much better at things like that. It's getting much better at adding things like MTT capabilities. And overall, again, I think it's at a high level overall the best bang for your buck software that you're going to get out there on the market. So hopefully that video was helpful for you to dig into and was a nice addition to the overall How to Use GTO Plus series. If you liked today's video, please hit the like button. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you're really interested in diving more into Solver-related content, check out the Solver Masterclass at www.solver.school. I've got over 30 hours of content in there that is really going to teach you everything you need to know about how to use solvers effectively in your own studies. I've also got a lot of new content that's either on the way in 2022 or different things that I'm planning out to add to the course in 2023. So definitely check that out. Thanks again for watching. So long.